This week, we are honored to introduce Matt Lawrence, co-owner of Reno Rennsport. Matt, thank you for taking your time to come in today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we begin, please indulge me while I share with our listeners what a privilege it is to have you on our show. The first place I visited when given the opportunity to bring this show to our community was to see Matt. Why? If you were to trust us as your source for everything automotive, we simply had to have the best. Many of you knew who Matt Lawrence was as soon as we mentioned his name. Many will as soon as he talks about his illustrious resume in Reno. Regardless of which category you fall into, or if you've not had the opportunity to get to know him yet, you tuned into our best show yet. I have over 3 decades in the automotive industry. Specifically, I ran a Porsche dealership in Reno in the 1990s for a number of years, and Matt and I have had the opportunity to work together when I managed a local high-end dealership that focused on Porsche products at the south end of town. So I consider myself qualified to say Matt Lawrence is not only the best Porsche tech in Reno, but the best in our country. Now, Matt's too modest to admit it, but you can take my word for it. I have lovingly referred to him on our past shows as the mad scientist, but the skills he has are simply off the capability chart of even the most schooled technician. Matt, let's start with how you even got into automobiles. At what age or what moment in your life did your love affair with cars begin, and specifically your Porsche cars?
Well, I started working on cars when I was 15 and bought my first 911 when I was 17. And basically, that was the beginning of the Porsche thing. I worked on a variety of cars after that, and in the mid to late 70s, I became involved in a shop in Mountain View, California, that was involved in racing cars and doing a lot of high-end street car stuff. And basically started working in Reno in the late 70s, early 80s, and worked for a small independent shop here.
I want to stop you there for a second. Late 70s, I just want folks to, this is when you're really completely started focusing on the Porsche product. Is that about right?
Yeah.
And if you do the math there, that's 30 plus going on 40 years of just specifically Porsche. I just didn't want you to skip right over that because that's big stuff. Please continue.
Okay. I worked for a small independent shop in town I worked there for almost 30 years, sort of became larger shop and got into other things. And so I decided I wanted to go off and do something by myself. And
that shop was one that was on South Wells Avenue, kind of specialized in Porsches, for, like you said, for many years. And then moved to the south end of town and expanded into other things. And then that's when you decided to partner with Brian Lauder,
yes,
the co-owner of Reno Rennsport. And about how long ago was that?
That's been a little over 2 years.
So what was it about Porsches that really attracted you to them over, you said you had mentioned you had worked on a variety of other things before your, tenure specifically devoted to Porsche. What was it about Porsche, though?
I really like the cars, the engineering involved, and, the unique uses and applications for it. And, a lot of the customers, people that I relate to. So,
well, and they're pretty, you said versatility. So you can really do, you can take a Porsche and you can do a variety of so many different things. The combinations are pretty.
Yeah, you can do just about anything you want with them. I mean, from driving them as they are and just as a basic transportation to making them into something really specific for what you want to do or what you want to own.
Well, mixing, matching different bores and strokes and some of these other, performance upgrades, suspension upgrades, they're really capable of just about anything you want. Is that it?
Yeah, they're pretty unlimited. I mean, you can get more out of them than probably anything else on the road.
Now, when you started working on Porsche, you kind of developed a niche, and I know this from working with you, but when it comes to Porsches, what is your specialty with them? Because everybody has one.
I do a lot of performance work. I tend to do more air-cooled stuff, but we also have somebody at the shop that does the water-cooled stuff. A lot of suspension work, a lot of engine and transmission work. That's kind of my preference.
Now, pushing horsepower is, I'm sure, one of our listeners and my personal favorites. And from the track to the street, there's different types of horsepower and uses for it. So let's talk about horsepower and how it relates to both.
Okay, well, for the track, obviously, you're mostly interested in, maximum acceleration around a given course. But for the street, really what you want is something that's more drivable. Obviously not too many people want to give up the car that starts up easily, passes smog. They want something with more performance, but lots of torque and low end power and still reasonable fuel mileage, and something that doesn't turn it into a car that you end up not driving because you don't enjoy it. It's too noisy or it's too, crazy to drive.
Right, and you may want the top horsepower on a track because you're looking for top speed, but in the city you may be looking for that horsepower that
at a much lower RPM, much more docile and drivable. But you still want a lot of torque.
Yeah, exactly. That develops the torque. It's really that rush from getting on the freeway. 0 to cruise control, I call it. Where,
most people spend relatively little time near a red line. They're mostly looking for power, in the normal driving range and maybe a little bit more, but mostly where you'd be driving it.
Just the fun of getting pushed back in your seat, accelerating onto an on-ramp and then getting up to that speed, blending in traffic and just enjoying that thrill. I mean, that's one of my passions for Porsche and why I've spent a good part of my tenure in the industry revolving around them as well. Now, I've found this. I want to know if you found this true too, that people often want to increase horsepower, and that's all they really want to do. And what they don't always consider is the other parts of the car that should be matched to the additional horsepower. Is that true? Yeah,
particularly the brakes and suspension. Doesn't take very much more power before you overpower the suspension, and you wish that you had a little more drivable car. The suspension on the car is designed for the stock motor, and as you put more and more torque on it, the car squats and moves around a lot more, and you also need to be able to stop the thing.
We talked about this before. I'd like to go a little deeper on this. If you were giving advice to somebody who's thinking about, performance enhancing their car, where would you tell them to start? I mean, would you say let's do the engine first, or?
Well, it depends how much performance the car is going to have. If you're making a small increase in power, that's fine. If you are going to put in something that has, probably 30 or 40% more power, you really need to address the suspension at the same time or before you do that in order to have the car drive right when you're done. It's just not feasible to make a major increase in power and not do anything else to the car.
Well, I guess, too, if you were to start with the brakes. Okay, so even in your present situation, your car is going to stop better. Probably no real safety risk. And if you work on the suspension now and you're going into a corner, you can have a little bit more fun with it, even with your stock motor. Then if you add the engine to it at that point, now you've got the suspension and the brakes that are compatible for it. Start the other way around. And that's what you were saying earlier.
You can get into real trouble.
You can, wind up not being able to bring the cars back down in speed.
Yeah, and the car's not as fun to drive, and you may end up with more serious issues than you want.
Causing damage to the car or yourself. Now, I had the conversation with Brian Lauder, your co-owner, recently about how your shop has managed to put together one of the most competent groups of technicians in the nation. I'm sure there are many well-qualified technicians around, but to put them all in one location is pretty amazing. And Brian was sharing with me the other day, and I experience this every time I walk into your shop, that when you look around, you just go, wow, what an incredible place to work, and just amazed at the qualifications of everyone in your shop. He mentioned because of it, it just loves showing up and being there and going to work every day. I want people to know more about your shop, that your shop does more than just Porsche too. So would you take a little time and tell us more about the entire staff at Reno Rennsport?
Okay, well, there's myself. There's Steve, who does most of our water-cooled work on Porsches. I've worked with him for 20 years.
I also had the privilege of working with him for a few.
Yeah. And we have John, who does the BMWs and Mini Coopers. And he's been really helpful there, and is very, very good with all of that sort of thing.
So we're talking about not just your performance BMWs, your Zs, but your SUVs. You work on those as well?
All types. We have a lot of different people looking for a lot of different things out of their car, and we try to accommodate everybody. We're looking to be more than the shop that just does an oil change and, tune up and pushes you out the door. We're trying to provide a service that ends up with a car that you keep and enjoy rather than something you trade after 3 years. And we also have Hare there who does all our wheels and tires. He's been doing wheels and tires for quite a few years at various different shops in town, and specializes in doing, alloy wheels and stuff without damaging them. And
that's big. Some of our customers, they have some really exotic, very expensive rims. And the last thing you want to do is have somebody that's not qualified, balancing or trying to remove those tires and reinstall new ones and damaging your gorgeous wheels. And now I've worked with Hare as well. It's like I said, I've got a few decades at this, and I've had the privilege of working with most of the people in your shop. And his skill level, it's just, he specializes in it. He does this day in and day out and has for so many years, and he just takes his time, and that's really big. I think there's a lot of people right now that may have had the experience of one of their rims getting damaged by somebody less competent. And certainly it's also, we talked earlier about this too, that getting your wheels and tires put on and then having them properly balanced and not having to go out and then come back because you've got a vibration or a shake. I mean, this is really all part of that commitment to perfection and quality and getting it done right the first time. So I just wanted to take a minute and elaborate on that. That's just how deep it goes, right down to the person that's working with your wheels and tires. And then, your partner, co-owner, Brian Lauder.
Yep. He handles all the business end of life there. I try not to get too involved in that.
I think you've got the fun part, personally.
It's my preference.
Now, I think also something of real interest here that I think is fantastic is that your customers, in most shops, they're just, you come in, you get handled by a service advisor, and you go and, you never really get to talk to your technician, and that's not true. They're free to come talk to you.
Yeah, we actually try to encourage that a little bit. It's just more connection between the customer and the technician usually results in stuff not getting missed and actually getting what you want done the way you want it done.
Well, certainly, it just makes sense to me. If I can talk to the guy that's going to actually work on my car, then, he knows what my complaint or my concern is that I want to have repaired, and he's more likely, like you said, to get it done right the first time. And not get lost in that translation between paperwork and the car.
Yeah.
Last week, we talked with Brian about your competitive labor rate, and I think people expect for the level of quality that your shop puts out that they may expect to have to pay more, but that's not the case, is it?
No, it's not. We really works considerably under dealer pricing and at least competitive with any other shop in town.
And then your capabilities are just leaps and bounds above. And I say that. I put my own reputation on the line and say that with the greatest level of confidence that you are the most competent shop in Reno for these vehicles. Now, we talk about every show about insisting the consumers start demanding the most for their money. And we want them, with their money, their power, to support only businesses that offer the highest quality products and services at fair prices. Reno Rennsport wrote the book on quality and fair pricing. At Reno Rennsport, you don't have to pay the most to get the best. You just have to know where to go. Visit Reno Rennsport. Be sure to tell them you heard them on the CarBuyer Advisor talk radio show. You can reach them at 775-331-4366.
That's correct.
775-331-4366. Or visit our preferred business page on our website to get their complete info and a link to their website at thecarbuyeradvisor.com. Matt, thank you again so much for coming in today. I hope you'll join us again soon. Matt Lawrence, Reno Rennsport.
Thank you, Mitch. It's a pleasure being here.
Reno Rennsport means racing in German, but at Reno Rennsport, you don't have to speak a foreign tongue because at Reno Rennsport, they speak your language.